Sure. I, here's 449. Yeah, I just heard myself. Okay,
Excellent.
so
All
it
right. Well
seems to be
then,
up.
who's intro? Oh, Mackie, take us away when you're ready.
While I double check what episode this is.
We just said it.
No, I didn't. But anyway,
I just said it.
you're assuming my brain actually heard that?
Yeah, it's impossible. It's
Ding-a-wee.
fair.
Ah,
I'm the same way
Anyway.
sometimes.
Anyway, welcome to episode 449 of PolyCast. I am Makalua. With me as usual, Mega Bears fan,
Offering you the best in live radio.
and the me and team.
Yet another age in paradise.
Whew. Okay, so we did not get to record last week due to personal family emergency issues, so we just put it off a week. So hopefully we'll actually get some people who will see it come up and connect and check us out. But yeah, I did not get a chance to put anything on social media about it. So sorry about that for not putting out an episode and doing a surprise one the week after. Hopefully after this we'll be able to go back to our regular schedule. So anyway, we've got news for Civ 7 these past few weeks. The biggest piece of news is that there is a new patch out. This is patch 1.2.4, patch 1 or something like that. I don't know. They're weird naming conventions for these patches. It's not a very big one, but it is one that offers a few little UI conveniences. So it'll be a Phil approved patch, probably.
Step in the right direction, perhaps.
Right. So the biggest thing is that they made game setup a little bit easier. So the age transition setting, they added the new options for age transitions in the previous patch. So now you can play the continuity mode where you don't lose as much of your stuff between ages. You can change that in like the main setup page instead of having to go into like advanced settings. And then all of the other settings for the age transition and game speed and difficulty and all that stuff are now sticky. So the game's menu will remember what your settings were the last time you played. So, if you are playing all your games with the same settings, you don't have to go and change those from the defaults every time you boot up the game and start a new game. So that should save you some clicks and a few seconds in game configuration and get you into the game faster for all of you who are still playing the game, which the Steam stats show is not a lot. And then what's this? No more restarting because you forgot to change the difficulty. What we got? We got some bug fixes, some crossplay bug fixes, and what else we got? And was this the one where they also did the Wonder? Was this the Wonder Balance one?
Yeah,
Or was
there's
that the last
Wonder
one?
Balance in the notes. I mean, there's probably some degree in various patches, but there's a reasonably long list here of Wonder changes.
Yep, so some Wonders I think got buffed, some Wonders got nerfed. One of the Wonders that got nerfed was the Gate of All Nations, which was one of my favorite Wonders. I guess because it was OP, so they nerfed it. Boo. Do they have a list of the specific all the Wonder changes? I don't even. Oh, here they are. They're all the way down at the bottom. I don't know anything in here that looks like worth talking about. So for the Gate of All Nations, they basically halved the war support change from 2 to 1, which is a major bummer. Gate of All Nations, I thought, was one of the best Wonders in antiquity because if someone surprise declares on you, they get a massive debuff. uh, for having a more for having low war support against you. But now that won't be quite as big, so I guess attacking someone with the Gate of All Nations will be a bit easier.
Yeah, it's reminiscent of the Temple of Artemis from Civ 4 in that regard.
I don't recall specifically what that did.
It doubled war weariness from any source of war weariness.
Gotcha.
Yeah, against that target civ. So if you built it, then your opponents would have more war weariness. With the caveat that high difficulty AI basically got to ignore that mechanic, so it was pretty hard to
Because they've got so many
to cause
buffs.
them any meaningful
Yeah.
penalties from just killing all their units.
Right, because they've got so many buffs probably to boost their war weariness anyway.
Yeah, but if they built it, then you'd probably want to figure out how to take that very early in the war, ideally before you shred their stack.
Yeah, not even just.
But
get
now
the
that this
benefit,
is a
but
little
just
different from
ignite
that in that
them.
way.
So
Yeah.
this is a similar idea for the Gate of All Nations. Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to call it anything specific. Some of these are fairly large in the degree at which they're getting changed.
Yeah, I'm
Like
just
it
trying
isn't
to.
just that. There's others where it's like, a 50% difference to cost from previous, or in some cases closer to double. Like that's pretty hefty.
Yeah, I'm skimming through the list. I'm trying to find if there's anything that I used a lot that the change would make me like not care as much to use it, or vice versa, something that I didn't use where suddenly I'm like, oh yeah, now I do want that. But nothing stands out to me. And the Gate of All Nations, I'm sure, is still going to be, very useful and worth having, especially if you are playing peacefully and want a deterrent to other civs just, declaring surprise wars against you.
Now, does the AI actually consider that a deterrent, or does it just do it anyway?
So, okay, well, I don't know. I think the game the game will warn the player about war support if you declare a surprise war, but I don't know if the AI like checks that at all. I mean, at the very least, what it does is it makes it easier for you to defend yourself. So I guess while it doesn't stop them from declaring war on you, it makes it so that they're a little bit less likely to just steamroll over you. Because
Yeah, you can put penalties on them.
Yeah, because the way the war support works, for those of you who don't know, is that if you have more war support than the other player who you are at war with, then for every point of war support, for every point of excess war support that you have, all of your units get a combat buff against that other civ's units. And like you get 2, 3, 4, +2, +3, +4 war support against someone. And I mean, you're talking about like one hitting a lot of their units. So it can be pretty substantial. It was pretty powerful, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's probably why I got hammered.
Yeah,
You do get some happiness out of it now. It's a small compensation. Quite small compensation.
I thought the Machu Picchu one was interesting because it was instead of 2 resource capacity in the settlement, they took that out entirely. And then it was +4 culture and gold on all the buildings adjacent to the wonder, but now it's just buildings gain a +1 culture and gold adjacency from mountains.
So I guess just tried to make it more of a mountainy flavored.
Yeah.
I feel like they could have done like a middle ground and maybe given you like a bonus to resources that's based on like mountains. Like maybe every city that has like a mountain gets like +1 resource capacity or something like that.
Yeah, but this also allows it to go across more settlements and cities, I think. At least the way I'm reading this, I'm thinking that's what it is. Instead of it just being the culture and gold by that wonder, its buildings across the empire can get +1 culture and gold adjacency for mountains.
Right. Yeah. It's now an empire wide effect. Yeah. Like I was saying,
Yeah.
I think they could have done like a middle ground and giving you like +1 resource capacity in every city that has a mountain.
Yeah.
And then it would have maintained the resource and economic theme while also adding a little bit of that mountain flavor. But whatever. It still has the mountain flavor and it still has an economic flavor because it does give you extra gold. So I guess I can't really complain. and I don't really play the modern age, get to the modern age very much. So I'm
The
actually
modern
not
age ones,
even,
yeah, I'm looking at that going, okay.
I'm like, I don't even know or remember what the heck most of these wonders did.
And this is where you'd want the effects to be more extreme, just so that they can still matter.
Shush phone. No one asked you.
Well, we didn't pick that up, so.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah,
Yeah, I need to
it's a
like
lot of
not leave alarms on.
yeah, I forgot. It's a lot of little tweaks, but these are like things I think you'd have to play out to see how much the effect is, which obviously the internal team already did, but for everybody else out here, we have to find out.
And plus, it's hard for the internal team to match what thousands of times the volume of play can pick up
Yeah.
on. Typically,
Here's a fun one. Under AI improvements, they said the AI will now properly favor coastal tiles when available when navigating the ocean in order to avoid ship damage. So the AIs will apparently no longer just sail their early exploration age ships out into the ocean and get them sunk in the deep water before they're allowed to cross oceans without penalty. Which, if that's what they were doing before, I guess maybe explains why I didn't see too many AI naval units, at least not in the mid exploration age, because they probably went and got them all sunk.
yeah, probably.
I assumed they just weren't building very many.
I guess we'll see, because it would be hard to tell previously. But yeah, if there's a major uptick in boats you observed, then you can probably infer what was happening to them previously.
Guess speaking of a different kind of balancing, I don't know if this is balancing or not,
Oof.
but Firaxis has had some layoffs. It's not just Civ, also people that worked on Marvel's Midnight Suns. But the way this is phrased optimizes its development process for adaptability, collaboration, and creativity. That is so much corporate speak, it makes my head hurt.
Yeah, I don't know why they even
Translation.
bother in situations like this. Like, who's really buying that crap?
I feel like it's
Translation.
almost more, to me, it's more offensive, right, than just saying, yeah, we laid a bunch of people off because we wanted to save money. Like,
We wanted to save money and we weren't making the profits we wanted to, so we figured the best way to put more stuff in our coffers was to lay people off. Just be real. Most of us can read through this at this point, you know.
Yeah.
and that's
Well, this
really
is
it,
like
too.
blatant too, so it's not that hard to read through.
Is
Yeah.
they probably can afford, 2K anyway can probably afford, to not lay those people off, but they don't want to because they gotta pay the shareholders and give bonuses to CEOs and all that stuff. Can't cut into those things when something doesn't make as much money as they thought it would. It's always got to be the people at the bottom of the food chain who always got to suffer the consequences for those things, which is always unfortunate.
We know that part of that is probably related to Civ 7, probably hasn't, despite other quotes we've seen about, oh, it's a slow burn, we didn't expect it to go gangbusters. Yeah, I think actually they did think it was going to, and it's not. Their last quarter was probably not what they thought it was going to be.
Well, or at the
Yeah, there
very
might be
least,
some scapegoating here.
at the very least, they
Yes,
probably projected that it would perform similarly to Civ 5 and Civ 6's releases,
right.
which it did not.
Yeah.
It's underperformed compared to those. So, even if they weren't expecting it to be, like Fortnite levels of successful,
They're expecting a little bit more.
Yeah.
And Midnight Suns as well. Also, while it got reviewed well and stuff, they probably expected more because it's a Marvel property thing that they would get more out of it.
Right.
So between the two of them, we're not getting the profits. Hey, let's lay people off. Well, great.
But
especially when you
inversely, like it doesn't really matter at this point anymore whether the products are successful or not. Like the way the game industry seems to work now is you make a bad game that doesn't sell well, people get laid off. You make a decent game that sells as expected, people get laid off. You make a great game that wins awards, is critically reviewed, and sells gangbusters, they still lay people off. Like it doesn't seem to matter anymore. Like, there's been multiple instances of like what was it, like a Hi-Fi Rush, right, from Microsoft. The
Yeah,
game
that
won
was
awards, was like Game of the Year in certain publications, and they still closed the entire studio and laid everybody off. But of course, they kept the IP, so they can keep selling it and making money off of it, and can even make a sequel, on the backs of all those developers in that studio that they completely shut down. Just like there's no way to win, right, in this industry apparently.
no,
If you're a
no,
developer
this,
or a designer or a programmer or artist or whatever.
If
and
you
it's
are in
not it.
AAA, yes, that's
Yeah,
true.
Right, yeah, the lesson is go indie. Make your own
Yeah,
studio so
let's
you're
just go.
not beholden to some big publisher
I,
that's just going to lay everyone off in order to keep their
yeah,
budget green.
that's not
because
so
this is
easy though, because like you're playing against quite the large field, so you have to be really good.
yeah, this
If
has
you're
been
like
going
Team
on.
Cherry from Silksong, then yeah, you're great. Um, there's a lot of good indie games too that also perform reasonably well. Certainly recoup the development cost and time investment without being like among the best games ever. So it's not like you're screwed if you're not like one of the biggest people in indie. But that's not an easy solution for sure. And I think AAA does have some inefficiencies with how it's prioritizing the costs of development in the first place, like how it's weighting uh, different things like assets and graphics and whatnot
Yeah, and
that
this.
is causing it grief because clearly people don't value that to the extent they value other aspects of gameplay, but they're putting a ton of resources and a ton of people into it in the first place. That's making the development cost of these games exorbitant, and also ultimately the cost of the game is much higher, and just people aren't prioritizing it the same way.
And also the cost of the hardware to run the games, because I don't need
Yeah,
photorealistic everything in every single game.
Right, I don't need every single follicle of Indiana Jones's hair to be rendered, or of Laura Croft's hair, you know, to be
I don't need the
rendered.
braid to be perfectly swishy like real life. If it swishes enough, I'm fine. You
It's,
don't have to.
yeah, especially if the cost of doing that means somebody's going to have to get laid off when the project is done.
yeah. And I mean,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
people have agreed with you at scale. If you compare like how Elden Ring performed to games with significantly better just visual graphics, it's pretty obvious that people are picking games for the gameplay and mechanics as long as it looks good enough, which does vary by person. But I think you get like a 90-10 rule there, where good enough is for most people is pretty far below current budgets on a lot of these
Well, and From
games.
Software has kind of always been that kind of has always been kind of in that situation where their games always artistically look very good, right? Like the artistry and the design is very good, but on a technical level, right, they always look like they're like half a generation behind a lot of other games in similar genres or niches or spaces or whatever. But they're
Yeah,
successful because they're really friggin' good games. They have really novel and interesting mechanics. They tell good stories that make you want to play the game more, to learn more about the story. And like I said, they, despite not being as technically proficient as other games, they still look fantastic. Like Bloodborne was one of the best looking games on the PS4. But like when you do things like take the camera out of bounds and stuff like that, you see that a lot of it is just a bunch of 2D sprites, right? Like it's really simple, not very technically demanding stuff, which makes you wonder why the game had to be locked at 30 frames per second even on the PS4 Pro. But hey, that's a different story,
Less
I guess.
complaints.
yeah, there might be some physics stuff going on when it comes to things like that easily.
Yeah.
I,
You also have technical limitations of the people on development. Like, not everyone is going to be as good at optimizing as others,
Yeah, well,
etc.
and I know for the
So you have to play
FromSoft,
around all these factors to a degree.
yeah, and the FromSoft games in particular, like I know enemy pathing is one of the biggest resource users. Like if you remember the first Dark Souls, especially if you played it on the PS3, when you start getting into Blighttown, like all those like rickety
Ugh,
platforms and ladders and stuff like that, like the
yeah,
frame rate would go down to like 10 frames a second because of like how unoptimized like the enemy pathing AI was and how hard of a time it had trying to find its way through all of that mess.
yeah, that was an experience.
For sure, yeah. Half the difficulty of Blighttown was just dealing with the poor frame rate. But in any case, all of us here at PolyCast, feel awful for any and all of the people at Firaxis who got laid off. Our hearts go out to you. This is, we
Yeah, and we
have
hope you can.
our issues with
We hope
Civ 7, but this is definitely not what we wanted to see.
no, no. We wanted to see people stay there and help keep improving the game, not get laid off.
Right, and that's kind of the double-edged sword with this sort of thing, right? Is that, okay, your product was not as successful as you maybe thought it would be or that you wanted it to be, but now you're also eliminating a lot of the people who would be able to work to make it better. And there are plenty of examples in the gaming industry of games that turn themselves around, and even the Civ games, right? Like Civ 5.
Yes.
Again, we always go to that example of Civ 5 was not great at vanilla release, right? It was slow, it was
But
kind
it
of
became
boring.
great.
It didn't have a lot of, it was lacking in a lot of production value, but, even before the first expansion came out, it got a lot better. And then when the first expansion came out, it was good. And when the second expansion came out, it was great.
Yeah. That's what we're hoping to see with Civ 7. It gets that same kind of curve where it had a rocky start, but we want it to be great at the finish.
Yeah, and then of course you've got No Man's Sky.
I don't know if we'll see a
poster child.
I was going to say, I was going to mention that example of wow, the turnaround for that. Yeah.
I don't know if we'll see a new lead designer on Civ 7 though.
No, that was one of the other things that they're looking for a head of product, which is like, oh,
I missed that.
Yeah, that was in a different. It's buried. Yeah, that was buried underneath, and I think one of the other things we've got in here. But yeah, so the listing things in
take it
Jumbo
back.
Pixels did. Yeah, looking for a head of product. Oops.
Now,
that's.
I read that a couple weeks ago, but I forget. Does head of product just mean for Civilization, or is it for all of Firaxis's games?
I wasn't sure from the job listing if that was all of the Firaxis things or not. But when they're replacing somebody at the top, that's a little ooh.
Yeah.
What makes me worry just a little bit. Because is the person coming in going to have the same kind of values that the core people that are there at Firaxis now have? Or is this going to be somebody who says, no, we need to do this because it's popular with the kids? Oh, boy.
Yeah, microtransactions everywhere.
Oh,
I don't know that they'll immediately go to that just because, like, the game isn't already not performing
isn't designed
that well.
for that.
Yeah, plus it's not performing that well right now. So, like, they've got to reasonably, one would hope, they've got to be trying to at least make it better first before going for more monetization.
Yeah, but at the same time, if they're laying a bunch of people off and replacing people at the very top, you kind of got to wonder, like, what is the future of the game?
Yeah, I mean, that's uncertain. Like, there's no way you can know. But I mean, I'm sure they're trying to bring in new people to turn that around. That's got to be the thinking. Maybe you don't agree with the methods, but they have to have it in their minds that if they replace the current people, they can get a better product. We'll see.
Yeah, we just hope that everybody who's been laid off with these is going to get back into work really soon. And we'd also like for the industry as a whole to stop this hire everybody, publish game, then layoff cycle. It sucks for everybody.
Yeah, stop treating these employees like they are essentially contractors doing a project, right? Where the project is over and now you don't need them anymore. Like, start treating them like they are full-time friggin' employees.
The better games we've seen over the years have been because there's been a continuity between the staff.
Yep, absolutely. And I guess one of the reasons why you might want to keep some of that staff is you might want to keep them for experimenting with the new game mode that you may or may not put in the game in the future, right, Phil?
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of continuity, if you ever felt like you needed less between ages, then there's a game mode for you.
Maybe
collapse mode. Yeah, maybe. That's true. I mean, it's publicly known, so it'll probably happen. Anyway, yeah, you get to keep fewer cities, so you get a harsher age transition.
Well, so this is speculation. So in the
Yeah,
patch
yeah.
notes that we were talking about at the start of this episode, one of the things they mentioned was that they're working on a new age transition mode, which they're calling Collapse, which is supposedly going to be even harsher than the default age transition mode was when the game released, and which is still the, I think, normal um, setting. Uh, but they haven't explained at all what that's going to be. So let's see if we can figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, there's been speculation on that. At the moment, I have a Reddit thread open, but there's others as well. I don't. How much do we know for sure?
As far as I
Not a
know,
lot,
like
right?
nothing other than that it's going to be harsher. Like I don't even know if they said what like would happen with cities. I mean, it's at the top of the patch notes that we were just looking at.
Yeah.
Where'd it
Yeah, I mean,
go?
I've seen a whole bunch of different speculations on it, but it's hard to comment without like concrete. Like, is it just like is it going to be harder to hit objectives? Or are you actually going to lose all but a couple cities, or like
Or
have
if you
your
don't
yields
meet,
nuked?
yeah, if you don't meet a certain threshold, then you have the total collapse as opposed to a partial collapse, like kind of what the current normal age transition is like.
Yeah, so the direct quote from the patch notes a few weeks ago is that it is still in early testing and will need time to see if it feels fun and fits well into the game. If it does, we'll look into when it might make sense to include it in a future update. We'll have more to share once it's further along. So like again, this even with them, like this is kind of like a thing that's in
Yeah,
active R&D, but yet they told us about, it, which is also a weird thing. Like, I mean, I guess they're trying to build hype and anticipation, right? Like teasing us with this, but like I don't know that it's something that a whole lot of people like asked for. So I don't know if it would really accomplish the goal of getting people excited. I guess just getting people curious is good enough, right? Like, what's the old
Yeah,
quote? Like, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
yeah, it's kind of also like a soft launch of the idea to put it out there into the player community and see how people react to it. Does this sound like something people want? We should keep developing. Like maybe the internal testers are having fun with it or finding interesting games with it, but they realize it could. Because if you keep having to restart your game and you keep running into this and you keep collapsing, it could be very frustrating and put you off the game too. So,
Right.
you know,
yeah. But like maybe they figure that's already happening, and to the extent that Civ 7 is going to be a game, they are just going to double down on the mechanics too.
and they know they have some of the players for both this game and other games that like a challenge. You might want to like turn it up to maximum, just to go, I'm going to push through this and win, and despite you trying to stop me.
Right. And it's
Well, often what happens with mechanics like this is the player manages them better than the AI, so it winds up
Yes.
adding advantage rather than disadvantage.
right. And while
That's
I
part of what makes AI so challenging in other Civ games is that it just has so many bonuses that it rockets in front of you and it's hard to catch up to it, even with it making poor choices. But if it doesn't get to keep its assets between ages, then that's not really relevant because its size relative to you is much less. Like it's not like on Deity Civ 4 where you get like 3 times the number of cities that you can have in right at the start and produce the settlers for them more cheaply and still afford all that crap.
well, and in
Yeah,
some
without
cases
that,
they
then it's
even
not going to run away.
and in some cases they even have the extra settlers on turn 1. Like I think Civ
Yeah, no,
5
that's been true for
and Civ
all the
4 did
civs, I
that.
think, in recent history.
I don't remember if
Yeah,
Civ 6 did it, but yeah, I think 4 and 5 like on the Emperor, I think, and Immortal, like they get like they get 2 settlers, and on Deity they get 3 or something like that.
it depends on the civ.
Uh,
But yeah,
but
the bonuses are really wild too.
but yeah, while I definitely like having options and different settings and stuff like that to tweak the games, to my personal preferences. I've always been a big stickler on this in sports games and football games in particular. Is give us more options to tweak the gameplay. Uh, it does have the drawback of fragmenting your player base, right? Because now if you've got these 2 or even 3 radically divergent game modes, like that's a lot harder to maintain balance between all of them, right? Because now you have to balance
Mhm.
everything with all three of these divergent modes in mind, which adds considerable complications to a lot of things. But then also, like, you have groups of the player base that are always playing one mode and groups of the player base that are always playing another mode, and that limits how many players are available to play in like multiplayer matches for any particular mode. Like if this collapse mode comes out and it totally flops and very few people play it, but there's a handful of people who really love it and they also really love to play multiplayer, they're not going to find a whole lot of people to play multiplayer with, because everybody who's still playing the game is going to be playing the other modes. So there's a lot of risk with a move like this as well.
Yeah, because if you do decide to add it to the game, it's really hard to take it back out, and that's also going to alienate some people if you do pull something like that.
And you're reminding me of how some of the game modes in Steel Division 2 work. Yeah. Basically, nobody plays them. I mean, that game is a really small player base at this point anyway. Yeah, and that just makes the less popular game modes even more rare to see.
But anyway, do we want to talk about some of the speculation for what people think might be involved with the collapse mode? Because I have some ideas.
I do think the like you lose all but a couple cities thing is interesting, but maybe damaging, because you would go it would be like yet another you just go quote unquote tall every game if you're playing this game mode.
Yeah,
So I don't know about that one.
I think I read some speculation that people are thinking that maybe you lose your towns entirely and then cities go back down to being towns, right? Which is kind of like the opposite of what the continuity does, where you get to keep all of your cities as cities, whereas in the normal mode, like some of your cities downgrade to towns. So maybe they took that one step further and towns disappear entirely and cities become towns. That could be one thing. And that would have
Yeah.
another big question is, does this supposed collapse happen to everybody, with the same rules, or is it like based on your performance in the previous age, like to what degree you collapse? Like that's another big outstanding question.
Oh yeah. But if you make
Yeah,
collapse too strong, then like it would basically it would almost undo the intent of the age transitions, which is kind of to reset the relative performance partially
Well,
between
unless
civs.
unless it's a rubber banding mechanic, right, where maybe the biggest
That's
empires
true.
collapse and the smaller empires don't, in order to
But
give
then
them
that's
more
not looking at your
opportunity to catch up.
performance.
Well, it would be looking at the inverse of your performance, kind of.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
and
Man, I would
also,
really hate that.
also, how much is a player going to be able to interfere with another civ to make them better or worse off, to try to influence what happens to them in the next stage? Like, can you force an AI to collapse by letting it grow too big?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Like, right. If they take too many cities, right, and like their happiness tanks or whatever, like, does that mean they, collapse and go into civil war or whatever? Whatever the heck it's going to happen, or does it just happen to
Yes.
everybody?
Yeah, is it close to the end of the age and I could just we're in a war and I could just let them take these cities and get too big and collapse and then take them back or put new cities or something, I could see that being a tactic.
That'd be weird.
Very gamey, but possible.
Yeah, I just don't know that you'd want to deliberately design that kind of tactic into.
No, but it wouldn't be deliberately designed. It'd just be what the players would do if they realized they could do that to an AI.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, for sure, something like that would be a deterrent to just like spamming a bunch of extra cities before the end of an age, because it might destabilize your empire.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you'd be
Yeah,
considered
yeah, of
too big for
course.
the rules and you'd collapse. Yeah.
right, like
I just
going
think
over your city
counting on
cap
the
or
AI to
something.
do something is usually not a good bet.
But yeah, maybe it is something that is going to be designed to more strictly enforce the city caps, right? Because in antiquity, you have a city cap of, it's depending on your civilization, it's going to be like 5, and what depending on your civilization and what civics you unlock, it's going to be like 5, 6, or maybe 7 cities, right? So like maybe the idea is if you go over that, right, and you're playing in collapse mode, that's going to be really bad. Right, and maybe civs that stay under the
Yeah.
city cap, maybe they are just fine. right? So it's to punish people who overexpand. Maybe.
It just
Who
feels
knows?
like the worst aspect of Civ 5 Reborn if it goes that route.
You
Yeah, and it
mean
also would kind of suck to be punished for doing well.
well, but I mean,
Yeah.
what I'm kind of getting at is like, is going over the city cap like doing well, right?
Ah,
Like
oh,
if
is that?
because Civ 7 has a soft city cap, right? It's not a hard city cap. You just take penalties for going over the city cap, right? But this might be a thing that makes that
Well,
penalty
people
much
already
stronger.
care about that, right?
People what?
People already care about that to a degree.
Yeah, but maybe they're noticing in playtesting or from player feedback that people or the AIs don't care as much about the city caps, and maybe they're like, oh, well, we got to make this more punitive. But again, I'm just completely
Yeah.
speculating. I'm just pulling things out of my butt here because I have no idea what this is going to be like. This is all just me spitballing ideas.
If past patch history and past game history is anything to go by, they will probably allow the AI more lax penalties when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Especially on
As
higher
difficulty goes
difficulties.
higher, yeah,
But one of
because
the
it just won't be able to optimize for it.
but my kind of hope for what they might be doing with this, and something that I have seen people reference before, is I'm wondering and kind of hoping if this collapse mode is going to be at least partially inspired by a mechanic in Aura History Untold. So I don't know if Mackie or me and team, if either of you have played Aura. I don't know how familiar you are with that. I don't know how familiar our listeners might be with that. But the way that Aura History Untold works is it also divides the game into three distinct ages. That game calls them acts. So it's a 3-act game. You don't switch civilizations between acts the way that you do in Civ and in Civ 7 and in Humankind, but instead what happens is you gain points during each act, and at the end of an act, the civs who are losing, who do not cross a certain threshold of point requirements, are eliminated from the game. Like, their empires collapse, all their cities become ruins, all
Ah,
their armies become
okay.
effectively barbarians, and now the places that they controlled are now large open swaths of the land that are full of goody huts and barbarians and stuff like that. That all the other civilizations who were performing at least decently can now move into and explore and expand into. So it kind of creates like another mini exploration period at the beginning of each new act, where there's kind of a mad scramble for all of the surviving civs to claim the territory that the collapsed civs left behind. And so I've seen some people speculating that that might be along the lines of what this collapse mode does, where it might actually eliminate poorly performing players from the game to open up more space on the map for the surviving players to expand into and fight over. Thoughts?
I feel like that kind of happens already in a typical 4X. Because like the worse you're doing, the easier it is for you to be conquered, and that's also true for the opponents.
Sure, but that still requires military action. But what Aura does is it makes it so that
Yeah, it just deletes.
even if you're playing like a peaceful pacifist strategy, you will still be able to claim new territory in each act without having to
Yeah,
go to war or break alliances or whatever. It also adds a little bit of an element where you might want to uplift, certain civilizations. Like if you have a trade partner, right, that is really small and really weak, but maybe they're really important for you to continue trading with, like you actually have an incentive to try to get them to score more points so that they are not eliminated from the game, because then you don't have perhaps a critical trade partner or a buffer civilization between you and another major rival. So like
it
they're
has to make sense mechanically though, and so often it
right.
doesn't.
Yeah, and Aura opens up these sorts of concepts. Like it doesn't execute on them super well, right? Which of course is always the problem with these sorts of things. Like
Because it's
big
hard to
ideas.
do.
Yeah.
It's so hard to execute them well. It's so hard to align mechanical incentives to what the narrative of the mechanic is attempting.
Right, but I can kind of see that working a little bit better in Civ 7 than in Aura, because Aura doesn't have a lot of diplomatic options. Like, basically all you do in Aura diplomatically is you trade resources. Like, that's about it. Whereas Civ, you have all those, like, different, like, gosh, I'm blanking on what they call the little projects that you do, where you, like, trade culture and gold and the little diplomatic agreements that you make. And like that seems
I
like
mean,
a way that much better facilitates the idea of trying to help out, right, a weaker civilization, so that, weaker friendly civilization, so that they don't, collapse. And to some extent we already do that a little bit in Civ with city states, right? Like there are times where you are suzerain of a city state and you go out of your way to protect that city state from, other aggressive civilizations. Like you put some of your military there to help defend them, or maybe you even put your units in a circle around their city center square so that they literally cannot be captured without declaring war on you as well. So maybe it's an idea that is trying to facilitate that kind of play, but with other civilizations. Maybe. Again,
You'd
I don't
have
know.
to get that kind of benefit from propping up another civilization.
well, having a trade
Like
partner and
something
having a buffer, yeah, that's sometimes part of it. And
I
six,
having a buffer means nothing to me in Civ games.
I
Absolutely
know.
nothing. A trade partner, maybe, if they're giving a bonus even better than a city state suzerain bonus, then maybe.
Yeah, well, maybe you defending them helps. Civ 6 has the World Congress thing, and you sometimes get can put forward the motion to do if somebody suffered aid or suffered a excuse me the
Disaster.
yes, you can put forward a motion to send them aid, and if you could do something, if you had something similar and or a similar mechanic where you could put forward, hey, let's or get other, you maybe even get other players to rally around something along that line where you can mechanically contribute, because in this case you have a send aid thing, you project you can build which sends stuff to them, or you can directly, if it's another civ, you can directly send gold to them to help.
And Civilization 7 does have that diplomatic currency, which is one of the most valuable yields in the game. It is very difficult to acquire. So maybe they have some kind of more unilateral options where you can just give stuff to other civilizations and get that diplomatic currency back in return, which then lets you do more things on the diplomatic stage. That could
Use
be a
them to
potential
farm it.
reward.
Yeah, if it's valuable enough, then yeah. Like, it has to really be worth it. Because otherwise, you just remove a competitor, and if you can't take the land yet for yourself, then you don't. But yeah, I just wonder, like, to what extent this is going to result in actual politics versus the player just concludes, well, I can't keep the cities, but I'll just pillage the hell out of them, and then any competitors that are physically near me are gone next era because they're doing poorly because they got pillaged.
I mean, which
Is
kind
it
of
like,
thematically makes sense, right? Like, even if you don't capture another civilization cities, if you like pillage them back into the Stone Age, it
yeah,
kind
I
of
mean, it
makes
makes
sense.
sense that they would struggle.
Right? Yeah, it makes sense they would collapse.
But
Um,
just like, how much real difference are we getting here if that's what players are going to do or conclude?
Another possibility that I think I've seen people proposing, like on Reddit or on YouTube comments or something like that, is the idea that maybe if some civilizations in the game collapse completely, maybe they add new civilizations to the game to replace them. So instead of one civilization transferring into another civilization, that former civilization collapses, is removed from the game, and then a new civilization spawns in its place and gets to kind of start over from scratch, maybe getting like extra settlers or something to kind of help them catch up to the other players. And that could be a potentially interesting game mode, because if you get to start the game as one of those civilizations, right, in the exploration or modern era, like that could be a fun little challenge mode too, where all of the other civs are established and you just kind of start with a handful of settlers and some military units and have to build yourself up to their level, as opposed to like the current settings of the game where you can start in a later age, but everybody starts in that age, with just their base default settlers and a couple units. So that's another idea that I've seen people throw out there, which could be interesting.
Might be hard to implement, depending on how things are going on under the hood.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember, for in Civ 5 and Civ 6, people kept asking for like an option for like city states to be able to become, full civilizations, right? Or for barbarians to become city states. And in Civ 5 in particular, I remember like there was a technical reason that they could not do that, right? Because there was like a cap. There was a like the number of civilizations and city states were like in an array in memory, which cannot be dynamically resized while the process is running. So like they couldn't do that at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like the city states one because that I don't. I guess it seems slightly historical that a city state would get powerful enough or survive what's going on to the big empire next to it and be able to absorb some of that other empire into it and become its own nation. It makes a logical sense, narrative sense. I guess is a better way of putting that. But I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know how to
happened
work
a number of times.
yeah, I don't know how to work the mechanical part of it though, because if it involves things up in the array, nope.
Well, especially if you like mess with ages, or like trying to put different things in different ages, where the game is
Yeah.
probably not built for that.
Yeah. Well, any other thoughts from either of you two about what you might want to see in a potential collapse mode?
I just want the player choices to matter. Like the choices you make can put you in a better or worse position depending on those choices.
Well, if they increase the stakes, then that I think for sure makes your choices matter more.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the choices you make do change the outcome, yes. Because otherwise, if you're just getting a reset, then it makes your choices matter less rather than more.
All right. Well, I guess we can move on to the next topic. Once again, this podcast is supposed to be a strategy focused podcast, but I know for most of the time since Civ 7 came out, we've been talking about just news and patch updates and stuff like that. So we want to make sure we throw a little bit of strategy in there too. So last time we started talking about some of the strategy guides that I have written, and we talked about one civilization strategy guide. I'm spacing on who it was. But today we'll talk about a second strategy guide that I had written, which is for the Axumites in the Antiquity Age. So this is, of course, available at my blog at www.megabearsfan.net. We'll try to put a link in the description in the YouTube channel. I've got to go back and update the descriptions and stuff like this to include links to all these topics, all the sources that we're using. I haven't been doing a very good job of keeping up with that stuff so far, so I apologize for that. But anyway, so Axum in Civilization 7 is largely a economic expansionist civilization with a high maritime flavor. So its unique bonus, the Kingdom of Natural Wealth, gives bonus gold on all resources and a production bonus towards the great. Is this pronounced steel? Stele? How do you say? Do you know? Do either of you know
Oof.
how that's supposed to be pronounced?
No, I would not recommend asking me for pronunciation of things outside of common English words.
Yeah. Um,
Me who called the Portuguese leader Johnny because I kept butchering the pronunciation.
I'm not sure. I think it's Stele, but I'm not sure. Anyway, so what this, of course, will encourage you to do is you'll want to expand. You'll probably want to build a lot of cities, and specifically, you want to make sure that all of the cities that you found have access to resources, because every one of those resources that you have in your territory is going to just give you extra gold. So that will be very valuable. And then, of course, you can use that gold for pretty much whatever you want, which makes Axum very flexible as well. Their unique district, called the Hawilt, I hope I'm pronouncing that somewhat correctly. Again, I'm not sure. provides bonus gold and gives extra culture for each adjacent wonder and other Hawilts. So these are, of course, a rural district, so you'll want to, build them adjacent to each other and adjacent to wonders. And then there's also a unique civic that Axum can research that gives you an extra culture adjacency bonus for being next to monuments and altars, which are, the religion and culture / diplomatic buildings as well. And then its unique units are naval and trade flavored. So its first unique unit is the Dao, which is a naval unit that has bonus combat strength on coasts, and it has a charge that allows it to create a new naval trade route. So it's kind of a merchant unit in addition to being a military naval unit. If memory serves, using that charge to create the trade route does not destroy the unit, so you do keep the unit after you create the trade route. And what it does is it spawns a trader unit, and if you're lucky, that trader unit that it will spawn will be the other Axumite unique unit, the Tankwa, which is a trade ship that has +10 range and cannot be pillaged. Unfortunately, both of these units, in my experience, have been very difficult to use effectively. And the reason for that is because of the underlying rules that Civ 7 has for how trade routes are created and how it determines whether to build a land-based trade route or a sea-based trade route. Because unlike Civ 5 and I think also Civ 6, you don't build like separate land trade units and naval trade units. You just build a single trade unit, and depending on where it goes, it will create either a land route or a naval route, or maybe even a combination of the two. So what are the actual requirements for being able to create a trade route using the Dao? First and foremost, there must be a target settlement that either has the city center or a district on or adjacent to the coast or a navigable river. Secondly, the settlement must have an improved resource for trade. You can't, since trade routes in Civ 7 basically only exchange resources between cities, they don't just exchange raw gold, you cannot send trade routes to cities unless they have an improved resource in their borders. The option will just be grayed out when you get there. The third requirement is that the target settlement must be within range of a trade route. So that's 10 tiles for land and 30 tiles for the sea. I think 20 tiles is the default range, but in the case of Axum, because of their unique naval trade unit, it goes up to 30. And then the fourth requirement is that if the target settlement is an independent power, it must also have already been upgraded to a city-state. So you can't send trade routes to like their little independent power like camps that they have at the beginning of the game that are kind of like their little barbarian camps. You have to befriend, someone has to befriend them and convert them into a city-state in order for you to be able to trade with them. So in order to create a trade route with the Dao, all 4 of those conditions must be met. And unfortunately, that's a difficult thing to do in the Antiquity Age, and especially in the early Antiquity Age, because A, not a lot of other civilizations are going to have coastal cities at that point. B, none of the city-states will have been upgraded, or none of the independent powers will have upgraded to city-states yet. And 3, since everything is spaced out further, there's a lot less that's going to just be in range. So it can be really frustrating and annoying to try to set up these trade routes. And on top of that, when you actually do use the Dao to create a trade route, there's no guarantee that you will get the Tankwa, because if it is closer to establish a land-based trade route, that's what the game will do. And then you don't get any of the bonuses from the unique unit, which can be really frustrating as well, because the unique unit cannot be plundered or cannot be pillaged, whereas if you end up getting a land trade unit instead, that can be pillaged. So using these effectively is exceedingly difficult and was a consistent source of frustration for me when I was playing this. I don't know if any of this has been updated in recent patches. I haven't seen anything about it in any of the patch notes that I recall. If there's anybody at Firaxis who is listening, if you could give us the option whether to create a land-based route or a water-based route, like that would be really cool and very much appreciated. And it would be very good, especially for Axum, because you'd get a lot more use out of your naval units, or your trade units, or your unique units. One of the unique civics that Axum has available to it, which also ties into this, is the Book of Himyarites. It is one of their final civics that is available on their tree, and one of the things that it does is it gives these Dao the ability to ignore zone of control. So this gives you the potential to make like suicide runs to establish trade routes if you want, because you can just go past hostile naval units to get to like a city-state or a friendly city, create the trade route, and then that trade route cannot be plundered, so you don't really have to worry about losing that trade route to those enemy naval units or independent naval units, hostile independent naval units that might be in the way. You might lose your Dao after the fact because it might have nowhere else to go except get sunk by those hostile ships. But you can at least get that trade route going. So if that's more valuable to you than the one unit, then that is an option that you can do. This is also, of course, very difficult to do because you're playing in the Antiquity Age and your units cannot enter ocean tiles at all. And the way that Civ 7's map generation works is that a lot of the time, the shallow coastal tiles only go out one tile from the land. So if there is a hostile unit that is blocking your path, you oftentimes can't go around it because there's not enough coastal tiles to actually go around it. And then, of course, if you're on a navigable river, those are only one tile wide. So if there's an enemy unit blocking you there, you still can't sail around them. So this is another thing that has kind of limited utility. So it's a very situational kind of thing to be able to use. And very difficult to use. And then they also have another policy that grants a Throne of My Fathers policy, which gives small increases to gold income to all your cities on the coast, which just gives a little bit more maritime flavor. So you'll be incentivized to build your cities along coasts. So the next part of the guide that I usually talk about after the civilizations uniques is talking about what leaders work well for this civilization. So there were 4 leaders that I thought worked particularly well with Axum, and I think the best one, or at least my favorite, was Xerxes the Achaemenid, and his ability was +1 trade route limit with all other civilizations, so you get to use your unique unit more to create more trade routes, and he gains 50 culture and 100 gold per age when creating a trade route or a road. So each time you use your Dao or any other merchant unit to create a trade route, you just get an instant bonus of culture and gold, which is very powerful. The second best leader, in my opinion, was Amina. She gets +1 resource capacity in all of her cities, and extra gold for each resource assigned to the cities, which plays very good with Axum's abilities, where they also get bonus gold for each resource. So in addition to that, you have more resources that you can put in all of your cities, and you'll get additional gold from them with Amina. I also really liked Augustus, who gets +2 production, who gets bonus production in the capital for every town, and can purchase culture buildings in towns, and gets a 50% bonus towards purchasing buildings in towns. So since Axum is going to be generating a lot of extra gold from all your resources and trade routes, you get discounts for purchasing things in towns with Augustus. And then the 4th leader that I thought played particularly well with Axum is Hatshepsut, who gets culture from every imported resource, and then production towards wonders on buildings and wonders, that are adjacent to navigable rivers. So you'll probably want to look for cities to settle near navigable rivers with Axum in order to be able to get your unique units out, and you'll get extra culture from resources that you import, which would also be slotted into cities, which gives you extra gold yields and stuff like that for Axum. And then they also get their bonus production towards unlocking the Great Stele or Steel Wonder. And for Axum, you can either get this from researching writing, or you can get it from researching one of their tier 1 unique civics. So you might be tempted with Axum to go towards sailing to try to get all your uniques. But as I said before, it's really hard to use those uniques at the very beginning of the exploration age because, there's just not a lot of places where you can go where you can create naval trade routes that early in the game. So I actually recommend that you just beeline straight to writing to get the Great Stele and don't worry about trying to get it from your civic tree. I mean, you can go for that too, and then whichever you get faster, maybe you get some goody huts that give you bonus culture or something like that along the way. So if you want the extra research, if you want the extra, assurances that you'll get there early, because the Great Stele is not very deep in the tech tree, so it's going to be a lot more competitive than some other wonders might be. Like for example, the last civilization that I talked about in the previous episode was the Mississippians, and they gained early access to the oh gosh, what's it called? The Great Mound, something mound. I'm spacing on what it was called. Maybe one of you guys can look that up real quick and remind me. But that's a wonder that is normally available very late in the tech or civic tree, but the Mississippians get it like really early on their unique tree. So you get really priority access to that one. A Monk's Mound, that was what it was called. For Axum, that's kind of not the case, so you're still going to have to fight to make sure you get the Great Stele out before other civilizations. You'll want to beeline towards it if you want it. And what that will do is it gives you bonus gold every time you build wonders, including that wonder. So you'll probably want to build other wonders. So some of the other wonders that I recommend to build for Axum are the pyramids, which give you extra production and gold on river tiles. And you might have a lot of river tiles with Axum, depending on the map generation and where you settled. The Colossus is another good one, since I think the Colossus might have changed. They did a whole rebalancing of wonders, and I haven't been able to update this guide since that happened. So some of this might be different now, but the Colossus is good, because again it ties into the economic abilities of Axum. Petra was good if you start out on desert tiles. I liked the Sanchi Stupa, which gave extra culture for having extra happiness. And since you have bonuses towards stockpiling resources, you potentially have a lot of extra incentive to put in luxury resources that boost your happiness. So you might get more benefit from this than other civilizations would. I always like, as we talked about at the beginning of the episode, the Gate of All Nations, which gives you extra war support in any wars that you declare or that are declared against you. So if you played with, if you're doing an economic build, more pacifist build, this helps you, helps protect you from potential surprise war declarations. They'll still declare on you, but at least their units will get a debuff. And then I also liked building the Bursa, which makes it so that your land-based trade routes cannot be plundered. So that way, if you don't get lucky and your Dao aren't spawning the Tankwa, they're just giving you land units, then you can build this, and this will protect those as well. It also gives you like free fortifications in some of your districts, which will also help against any potential neighboring warmongers. And then, yeah, basically from there on, you should be building a large, naval economic empire. I want to say that Axum was the only antiquity civilization that had a unique naval unit. So you're probably not going to see a whole lot of competition on the seas. So your Dao can dominate the coastal seas in the Antiquity Age if you decide to build a bunch of them. So you can use them to support invasions of other players. You can pillage a bunch of their districts, and there probably won't be a whole lot of resistance against them other than land-based bombardment. And of course, once you've already used up that trade route charge, then there's no other economic function for your Dao. So you might as well send them on a military rampage if that's something that is beneficial to you or that can hurt a rival neighbor. And of course, they're very good defensive units because they have a bonus combat strength. So if you're worried about some errant independent civilizations pillaging like your coastal resources, you can camp on them with your Dao, and they'll be pretty good defensive units.
Yeah, and you did note that they couldn't heal outside of friendly territory, so that's kind of a better option, is to park them on the naval resources.
Yes, and this is another thing that I don't know if it has been changed yet, but Civ 7's UI, when naval units are next to land, the button to heal will show up in the naval unit's little unit window at the bottom right of the screen, and it will fortify, but it will not actually heal. So it will just fortify there until either you wake it up or some other unit comes along and finishes it off. If it is not in your territory or friendly territory, it will not heal. I don't know if they have fixed that yet, either by removing the heal button when it doesn't actually work, or by actually making it so that naval units can heal when they're adjacent to land. I don't know what the idea was. Maybe they intended for naval units to always be able to heal when they're adjacent to land, even if they're not in friendly territory, which would be cool and kind of does make sense, even if it heals more slowly than in your territory. That would definitely make naval units and amphibious invasions a lot more viable for civilizations, especially that have a high naval flavor. But as of the last time I played, that was not the way the game worked. That button shows up, but it does not actually do anything other than turn your unit into a sitting duck. So be warned. Maybe keep a save going before you decide to try that out, so that you can go back if you find that it doesn't work. And then the last bit of the guides that I create are just recommendations for what civilizations you should pick going into the next age. So if you get through the Antiquity Age with Axum and get into the Exploration Age, then I think there are a handful of other naval-themed civs that are very good options. I think the obvious one is the Songhai. They're I think the kind of the default antiquity follow-up or exploration follow-up to the Axum civilization, and they get extra resource capacity from navigable rivers, and their trade ships also cannot be plundered while they are on navigable rivers. So you kind of get part of the unique units ability as part of the civilization's ability when you change to the Songhai. And then they get bonus gold for trade routes and other economic bonuses. The next one that I think probably would be a good choice is the Chola, who get +1 trade route whenever they do the improved trade relations action. So again, that just allows you to keep emphasizing naval trade or even land-based trade as you go into the next age. And then, of course, Hawaii is also a decent option. You get culture whenever a city expands to maritime terrain, and they get extra happiness on fishing boats. So not really a lot of bonuses towards like trade or the economy. It's more of a culture focus, but it is also a maritime themed bonus. And then I like to talk about how to play against this particular civilization. And in the case of the Axumites, I don't really have a whole lot of advice for playing against them, because there's not really a whole lot of meaningful counterplay for them. You cannot plunder their unique trade unit, so the only real recourse you have would be to prevent them from creating those trade routes to begin with, or to destroy or conquer the cities that they're trading with in order to destroy that trade route. You're not going to be able to compete with them from a naval standpoint, other than just by outnumbering them, because none of the other antiquity civs currently have unique naval units. So you're not going to have a naval unit that's going to be stronger than the Tau. So you're just going to have to outnumber it if you actually get stuck in a naval war with Axum. So there's not a whole lot that you can do to slow down or stop their economic development, other than by just settling all of your own settlements inland. Obviously, if you don't put settlements on the sea, they can't send their unique unit there, which means they're stuck doing land-based trade routes, which means they are still pillageable to your settlements. So that's pretty much all you can do, is just change the way that you play in order to minimize their bonuses, if that's something that you feel like you need to do. But of course, you also don't really have to feel like you need to be all that competitive against them, because you can try to be friendly with them. They're a trade-based civilization, so they probably shouldn't be too difficult to be friendly with if you start trading with them. And, they could be a good source of early gold. They could be a good, military ally early in the game. So if you can't beat them, join them. And of course, the way that the legacies work, like, they're not mutually exclusive. So even though Axum has a lot of bonuses that are going to make it really easy for them to, complete, like, the Silk Road legacy, that doesn't mean that you can't also complete it, right? So, like, you're not directly competing in that sense either. So again, you can stay friendly with them and, be trade partners and allies, and that's a perfectly viable thing to do, because you're not really trying to win in the exploration age. You're just trying to set yourself up to win later. It is not a zero-sum game at this point yet. And that's about all I've got for Axum. Do either of you two have any other notes or comments that you want to make?
Nothing for me.
Yeah, I had my one thing in there. That's one thing I just noted about that. But yeah, but it does seem like they'd be. It does seem like they would be good to have next to you when you're playing maybe a more peaceful-ish game, because they don't seem like they're geared towards war. Not that they can't declare war on you, but they want. Hopefully, the AI is trying to maximize that trade route advantage. So, in your next door, hey, convenient trade neighbor.
Right. Unless, of course, it's naval warfare, in which case you
Yeah.
have to be a little bit careful. But
right.
And then, of course, a lot of it depends on what leaders you roll, because all the leaders have their own little agendas, which influences diplomatic relations. So if the AI or another player picks, well, I guess it doesn't matter with another player, because they're going to do whatever they want. But if the AI picks a leader that just does not mesh with your civilization or leader or playstyle, then Axum, or any civilization for that matter, is just going to be hostile. Like, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. I'm looking at you, Frederick, Mr. Oh, we met on turn 2 and you don't have any wonders yet? Well, I hate you now. Let's go to war.
I gotta say, it's the distance between Axum and Songhai is already impressive, but the other suggestions, just picturing what kind of age transition would be required to convert Axum into Chola or Hawaii, is it's a fun mental picture. Especially Hawaii. That's quite the trek. I mean, Chola's pretty far too.
We just teleported to the middle of the Pacific.
And
yeah.
Hawaii is kind of a weird civilization in Civ 7, because, like, you would think that they would have a bias towards starting on, like, an island chain, and Civilization 7's map generation seems like it would be perfectly conducive to that, right? Because because of the way the legacies and victories work, all the maps are basically 2 continents and then 1 or 2 chains of islands in between them that have all the like distant lands resources. But none of the civilizations spawn on those island chains because they all spawn on the continents. So like if you become Hawaii in the exploration age, you're not ever really going to be like an island based empire unless you go and explore and colonize on those island chains. So and this kind of ties back to something that I was talking about with the potential collapse mode. Like if they actually make it, if they do make it work the way, one of the ways that I had kind of talked about, where the civilization, where poorly performing civilizations can be removed from the game and then replaced with newly spawning civilizations. Like you could actually make it so that Hawaii spawns on some of those island chains and starts there, and that would be a little bit more flavorful. Of course, that won't happen if you're starting out as the Axum and transitioning to Hawaii, but if you're just starting as Hawaii in the exploration age, that could be a cool, flavorful option. But that's not the way the game works currently, and again, we have no idea how collapse mode will work, or given all the shakeups at Firaxis, if it's even going to happen at all at this point. Who knows? I feel like since they talked about it publicly, they will probably release something and call it collapse mode. But who knows if it'll be what they were originally envisioning, or if they are given the time and resources to fully flesh it out the way that they were planning to. Hopefully they do, and hopefully it works well.
What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, I don't know that things for Civ 7 could get much worse. I mean, other than just nobody playing it at all anymore.
That usually takes time, even for the worst of games.
Right. And it's hard to imagine a big name game like, Civilization having no players at all.
Yeah, I do still see posts around different places. The people are still having fun playing the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's people who liked the game in vanilla, too. So there are always those players. I mostly like it. I just, have frustrations with it. There are things I really like. There are things I really dislike.
I do not think you're alone in that. I think there are many of you.
Right. Yep.
New lead designer for Civ is the current lead designer of NCAA football.
I don't know about that.
I was just thinking about ways to make it worse, and that would almost guarantee that Civ 7 would become worse.
Yeah, I had a lot of frustrations with this year's college football game too. I was very,
I saw that.
Very disappointed. I can't believe it, but I actually expected more from EA. And
oh, there's your mistake
your
right
first
there.
I know, right? Like Picard facepalm, right? Like what was I thinking? But yeah, I thought they would need to try to build at least a little bit of customer goodwill, before flushing it down the toilet. So I thought they might actually go like 2, maybe even 3 years of putting a lot of effort into it and delivering a really good, dramatically improved product each year. And no, like the game came out and a bunch of stuff that worked last year even just flat out don't work anymore.
I think EA's best conception of goodwill is like writing stuff to hype up a game in advance. That's as close as they get. They don't actually deliver on all that, but they'll try to hype it. That's their quote unquote goodwill.
Yeah, every year this one new feature is going to completely revolutionize the game and make it more realistic, like real football. And then you actually play it, and it's like, I'm sorry, it doesn't play any different at all.
Yeah, and sometimes the new feature is not even new.
That's right. Sometimes it's a feature from 20 years ago.
Yeah. Ugh. That is 20 years ago now.
I know. I'm sorry. I remember the good old days when it was only 10 years ago.
Yes.
You mean the 90s wasn't just a few years ago? What?
No, the early 2000s weren't just a few years ago either. Because that's what we're talking about.
Still love that interaction with my nephew. He like asked me to play some game, and I looked it up, and I'm like, "Oh, it's like Streets of Rage." And then he looked that up. He's like, "That's way before I was born." I'm like, "Yeah, okay." Fantastic.
All right. Well, I guess that wraps things up for episode 449 of PolyCast. So thank you for joining us and listening. I've been Mega Bears fan, joined as usual by Makalua.
Who needs to go find some foods and things and stuff?
Get you some of that caffeine. I know you
Yeah,
run
brain.
you run on caffeine.
Yes, and food, but also caffeine.
And the me and team.
Some strategies never get old.